Hello, and welcome to the Franchise Life. I am your host, Stacie Shannon. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Anthony Tata. And Anthony, where do you begin? He was a Brigadier General in the Army. He has authored 16 books, thriller fictions, of which I have finished my first book called Chasing the Lion. Highly recommend. He has also served under President Trump in his career, and among many other things, also currently serves on the board of directors for a company called Homefront Brands, which owns 6 different property service brands. Welcome, Tony.
Great to be with you, Stacie.
Yeah. So I had the pleasure of meeting you in Charlotte, North Carolina a few months ago at Homefront Brands.
Mm-hmm.
I was there learning about their different franchises, and subsequently I have invested in one of their brands, Temporary Wall Systems, which I'm currently launching here in West Palm Beach. But before we get into, the franchising world per se, where you find yourself today in part, share with us about your background.
Sure.
Your stellar experience in the Army and where you found yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I always start with, I'm the son of 2 school teachers from Virginia Beach, Virginia. My father is the son of Italian immigrants that immigrated from Italy in the 20s into Detroit, Michigan. My grandfather was a brick mason, a block layer. And so very humble beginnings. My mother from the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia. They actually met when my dad was at University of Virginia as a football standout for UVA back in 1950 or whenever it was. And he went to play for the Lions and got cut the last cut before the regular season started. He got drafted, and he came back and was student teaching in Charlottesville, Virginia, getting his master's in education, and met my mother, who was already a teacher at the high school and they met in the lunch line. And so very humble beginnings, 2 teachers, 3 kids. I have an older brother, younger sister, and my brother went to the Naval Academy. He was a pretty good kicker on the football team. And I got recruited by West Point, and I went and played baseball and wrestled at West Point. And then my sister one day calls me, and she was the best athlete of the whole group because she ran a 4:42 mile in high school, and she was being recruited nationwide. And she calls me at West Point my sophomore year or whatever it was, crying, saying, "Dad's trying to make me join the Air Force." I'm like, "Join the Air Force? What are you talking about? You're a national champion miler." And she goes, "Yeah, somewhere in Colorado." And it clicks for me because my mother had then become a guidance counselor, now called a school counselor. And they knew the ticket. I had my brother at Navy, I was at Army, and these are, you don't pay to go to those schools other than with a lot of time and effort. And they wanted the hat trick. My sister had received an appointment to the Air Force Academy, which she turned down, and went to run at my dad's alma mater and was a national champion miler at University of Virginia, which was a better life for her. I was in the second class that had women in it, and so there were 2 all-male classes and then 2 mixed gender classes. And I told my father, after I talked to my sister, I said, "It's going to be okay one day. I don't know that it's okay now, that you want your daughter, my sister, in this environment, knowing my sister, as sensitive soul that she is." And so I embarked on a 28-year military career. I was a paratrooper. I commanded in the 82nd Airborne Division and the 101st Airborne Division, Deputy Commanding General of the 10th Mountain Division. Lots of operational time. My last combat tour was Afghanistan. I was the Deputy Commanding General of about 25,000 troops there. a lot of activity, as we say. It was a tough duty. The wars, when they started post 9/11, took a toll on the military community in a big way. Um, and a lot of people got burned out. I would say that for those of us that were sort of continuously operationally deployed, it took a toll on a generation of veterans. And then when I transitioned out, I wanted to get back to my roots, education. And so I talked to my parents at great length about what I would do post military career. And I went through a training program called the Broad Academy. Eli Broad, billionaire philanthropist out of Detroit, Michigan. LA. He recently passed, but he lived in Los Angeles, and the Broad Museum. It's art, medical, and education foundations. And his education foundation was looking for leaders to engage in public school systems, and they recruited me, and I appreciated that, and I went through the program. And then Michelle Rhee, who was the chancellor of DC Public Schools at the time, was also on the board of the Broad Academy, and she called me one day and said, "Hey, Tony, I need a general to come in and help me run the business side of things so I can focus on academics." And so Michelle and I are very close to this day, and I did that for almost 2 years, and then got hired away by Wake County, Raleigh, North Carolina, largest school system in the state, 15th largest in the country. Led that system for a couple of years. Loved it, really kind of self-actualized as a leader in that capacity. Then the governor, the newly elected governor, asked me to serve as the Secretary of Transportation of the state. I thought, this would be a combination of what I've done in education, what I've done in the military, and be able to apply those skill sets across the state. Second largest transportation system. A lot of people don't realize this in the country, with 22 ferries, 2 seaports, 3 railroads, wow. 72 airports, 88,000 miles of highway. A lot going on. Big state. Important. The intermodality of moving from the port to the rail to the trucks, and that's it's jobs, it's commerce. And then got into private business. I played around with a political run and ultimately chose not to do that. Stayed in business, and then the President of the United States personnel office calls you and asks you to come serve your country again. And you just heard my public service background. I couldn't really say no to that, despite the abuse you go through and the scrutiny you go through in the media, right? Sure. But at the end of the day, being a good citizen to me involves serving your country in some way. And now all of those experiences have led me to several different business lines, one of which is franchising. And what I come at franchising from a couple of different directions. I'm very close friends with Nick Neonakis, the franchise consulting company, and involved in a couple of endeavors with him, and Robot Lab and Big Peach Car Wash and a couple other things. And I met Jeff Duden, who is Homefront Brands and Duden Group, through Nick, and Jeff and I have become friends, and I have the privilege of serving as an advisor on his board, and certainly Temporary Wall Systems and other companies like that are part of Jeff's focus is let's bring jobs back to Middle America. Let's create jobs for Middle America and help restore part of the country in that fashion. And I'm very much on board with that mission. The humble beginnings that my parents had, and certainly my brother and sister and I had, helping the Joe Lunch Pails of the world, certainly is part of my life goal. And you do that by creating jobs. You do that by creating opportunities. And the second piece, I would say, is from a veteran angle, helping veterans transition and get into these kinds of opportunities, whether it's owning a franchise or working for a franchise. I've served on several leadership roles of several different veterans charity organizations that help with transitioning veterans, and certainly today I'm an ambassador at Homes for Our Troops that provides housing for our most severely wounded, missing a limb, traumatic brain injury, that kind of thing, veterans, and so it's been a very holistic effort for me, wrapping all my experience into helping create jobs for everyday citizens and for veterans.
Well, thank you for sharing all that. Wow. First and foremost, thank you for your service. I have several family members who have served in a past life when I was in the corporate world, worked with the Army directly to help provide aviation and aerospace technology. Mm-hmm. So I have a real appreciation for the sacrifice that you made. It's really interesting. You're a very humble person. You definitely have a passion for helping others between your military career and where you found yourself today. When you talk about veterans and transitioning, I do find myself quite often talking to veterans that are looking to for what that next step is, right? Like, in business ownership seems so unachievable for so many people. Mm-hmm. But when you bring in and shared Homefront Brands mission and Jeff Duden trying to create more jobs and more opportunity for middle America, that is one of the things that appealed to me about Homefront Brands and in particular temporary wall systems. Mm-hmm. But, as going from your educational background into the military, then directly, I believe, and serving for, I believe, over 30 years.
Yeah, 28 years of active duty plus 4 years at West Point. Which,
incredible. So having that transition, what skills do you feel that you acquired? I mean, certainly one that stands out undoubtedly, given the number of troops you oversaw, is leadership. But mm-hmm. what skills do you feel that a veteran, I guess, earns or learns throughout their military career that could mm-hmm. be and is transferable into business ownership?
Yeah, that's a great question, Stacie. The skill sets that many veterans learn, particularly those that are combat leaders, like a sergeant on the front lines or a lieutenant or a captain, they are out there in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, wherever our nation takes us, and they are alone and unafraid. They are the ambassador meeting with the mayor or the governor of some province in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria, and taking care of their troops and making sure that all the logistics is happening to keep their men and women, fed, fueled, with ammo, all the things they need to do their job. So when you look at how they have this external facing mission and the internal responsibility of maintaining and leading and caring for, it's different than your average 9-to-5 job, because if you fail on getting the fuel or the food or the water to your team, you don't eat, you don't drink, you don't move, right? And so there's that everyday responsibility to make sure that you've got a plan, you've got a system, and meanwhile your mission takes you out into the community as it is, and whether that's interacting with mayors and governors and council people, because every nation has some form of government. It may not reflect exactly what ours is, but you're constantly dealing with village elders and so forth. And that requires some form of maturity, some diplomacy, and certainly balancing the logistical requirements of your mission with the mission accomplishment of engaging these leaders among who you have to operate. I couldn't think of really a better preparation for business ownership, for owning a franchise or working for a franchise, because it's all the same stuff. You just got nobody shooting at you, hopefully. So, when you think about running a car wash or a temporary wall system or whatever, you got to get the stuff there. You have to engage people to sell it, right? And so you have this external piece and you have the internal piece. If you do sell it, if you do land a job, you gotta make sure everything's there. The equivalent of the beans and the bullets and the fuel and the water. And when you land your first customer, you're gonna have to make sure all the temporary wall systems are there, all the components are there. You got the right people to set it up and all of that, and that's the logistics that go into it. So this internal organization skill and external engagement skill that every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine learn when they're in these environments are directly applicable to franchising.
No, I like that. And, it's interesting, just taking that a step further, is the franchise system, can draw a parallel to kind of, a military structure per se. Because the beauty of the franchise world is you do have a corporate office or, the umbrella brand that is helping provide guidance and support and technology and so forth to their franchisees, which could be those combat individuals that you're using as an example. But at the end of the day, you're running your own business, like your own mission, and are responsible for everyday decisions to either be successful or not, right?
Yeah, it's a direct parallel. I think about, I had 91 forward operating bases in Afghanistan that I circulated around. Some were led by lieutenant colonels, some were led by captains, all had very seasoned sergeants as advisors to these commanders. And at the end of the day, they loved having that autonomy and independence, but they also knew that there were guys like me that they could reach out and say, hey, I haven't gotten my ammo resupply for 3 days. Or so having that headquarters entity to resource them, not necessarily tell them what to do all the time, but to help them when they needed it is very applicable and very transferable to the business world here, where with franchise, they're out there slaying it themselves. If they run into some issues, they can always call the HQ and say, how do I fix this? Or can you get me more of that? And it's nice to know that you can always call back to somebody in case things are going a little sideways.
Absolutely. You're not in business by yourself, but for
Right.
yourself,
Right,
in essence,
exactly.
which, no, that's interesting. I never really drawn the parallel. I know that, through my experience and exposure in the franchise industry, that a lot of veterans make absolutely excellent franchise owners. But I'd never really drawn that parallel to the structures being very similar. Two different worlds, but very similar. So let me ask you this. A lot of clients, whether a veteran or not, deal with fear. So the fear of the unknown, the fear of, taking that step into business ownership. In the world that you lived in the military, you and your troops and counterparts, you faced fear day in and day out.
Sure.
What advice would you give someone? And I'm speaking more, this will apply to everyday life,
Sure.
but what advice can you give someone who is dealing with fear and making a decision like going into business for themselves?
Yeah, I that's a really good question, because it revolves around, in my mind, all of us want to take care of our families or take care of ourselves. In the military, you've been out doing your mission, but you didn't have to do a quarterly report. You didn't have to. you certainly had to provide a lot of reports back and paperwork and all that stuff. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but your paycheck was not based upon any EBITDA or revenue or any of that. You're being paid because you're a soldier, sailor, airman, marine in the military, and so making that transition from the military, or even as a civilian, out of a corporate job to go out and break out on your own is one that creates a lot of anxiety, because am I going to make it? Do I have enough money? What if I fail? And I've been very successful at some business things, and I've failed at some business things. I made some good investments, and I made some bad investments. And what I would say is that everybody has to do what's right for their situation, for their family. How much risk can they take? What is the reward that they see coming back? How much value do you put on being an independent operator versus being a member of a team, a cog in a wheel, not in a negative sense, but just one of several people giving way together in a corporate building. And there's trade-offs. There's personal satisfaction. There's a heck of a lot of motivation that comes with being an independent operator or franchise owner, knowing that it's all on my back. Maybe I bring in a teammate to help me, and that it's. Yeah, you have to analyze it both in a scientific and an artistic way, emotional way, as what makes me personally happy. Am I okay 9 to 5 in a suit at the office building, or do I want to get out there and run temporary wall systems and talk to developers and builders and condo owners that have some reconstruction to do, and sell the product and make outsized gains, and do I have enough savings to carry me over until I start to see that return on investment? So, yeah, I don't think it's a one size fits all at all. I think it's every individual. What's your personal circumstance? What motivates you, and what's your financial situation?
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. Having spent 21 years in the corporate world, it's interesting because I speak with a lot of individuals that would like to make an exit from the corporate world, but the perceived security of the corporate world keeps them in, right? Mm-hmm. And the one thing I learned, regardless of what level you're at, is everybody's dispensable. Everybody can be replaced. Right. So to me, it's a false sense of security. I mean, there are many people that are able to, go their entire careers in the corporate world. And I think that is fantastic. But I've also been privy to and subject to individuals that are easily displaced and replaced, right? So, that's where, and obviously with what I do, I'm a huge proponent of taking your future into your own hands. And, certainly you have to weigh the risks and make sure that you have the financial wherewithal and, are making the best decisions for yourself. But building a future for yourself and investing in yourself is what I'm passionate about. So back to your franchise investments, and how much time, and I know yours are more passive investments. It's not that you're running a franchise on a daily basis by any means, but you're invested in franchise opportunities. How did you choose the ones you chose? What were the attributes that you were looking for when considering franchise investment?
Yeah. So I what am I interested in? I am an equity owner in 2 different franchise opportunities, and they take up a fair amount of time every week. I'm on. It's like being on the board of directors. I have a call in an hour and a half with the car wash franchise that we are doing, and then I've already had a call this morning with the robotics franchise that we're doing. And so the time commitment is significant, particularly measured against everything else that I'm doing. But for me, it was, I've had other opportunities that I've said no to, but these two things really interest me. One is, I think, just the financial opportunity with the car wash, because that seems to be a lot of all the rage right now with private equity firms. And so being involved in the car wash is interesting. I work with a lot of PE firms and other parts of my business, and to see those two sides of the world coming together, there's a lot of opportunity there. And so I was interested in that. The robotics, the robot lab is they have robots that will go into hospitals and with ultraviolet rays and clean the hospitals. They have robotics in school systems. They have robots that will go into that our restaurants use to go around and deliver food or clear trays. And right now, there's a real employment crisis in this country. And so when you think about robots and how robots can augment and make people more efficient, and particularly business owners more efficient, if you're having a hard time getting servers and you can have these robots going around cleaning tables, it's additive to your workforce, and you can have your servers focused on your customers as opposed to trying to do two things at one time. So I love the concept, and so for me, I love the concept of both of them, and I think that's kind of at the heart of why you make any decision with regard to doing business. I like the people that I met in both of these opportunities. I mean, I made personal visits to the headquarters before I decided to get invested, and just tremendous people, all entrepreneurs, all very salt of the earth folks trying to bring services to citizens and also make some money while doing it. And that's what Jeff Duden talks about, bringing the middle class back to America with opportunities for business. And I want to do my part there. I've served in many different other ways in our country, and I feel like this is almost like service as well, helping create opportunities for so many great Americans that want to just own a business and help their local community.
Absolutely. I mean, so a couple of takeaways from that is, number one, the breadth of the franchise industry. I mean, when people think of franchising, they think of McDonald's, they think of Chick-fil-A. Usually it's more food and beverage type opportunities. The breadth is so wide. So I've mentioned temporary walls. You've mentioned car washes, robotics. I mean, there's senior care, there's the typical food and beverage, there's property management. It's just so vast.
Right.
So many different opportunities. But the other thing, which is really interesting and a trend we've just started to see in the past few years, is private equity getting involved in the franchise industry because of the value they see in it. Right. And that is significant.
And it's also getting back to your previous question about decision making and security and safety and risk. That's also a real signal to people trying to make a decision that, if I make this leap, there's already people from the PE, private equity world, making that leap. They're investing in car washes and other types of franchises because they create so much opportunity and so much business.
Absolutely. And they're even investing in franchise organizations that own multiple brands. I mean, we see it from a number of different angles. All right. Well, we've covered a number of topics, and as we know, you have a franchise call coming up soon. So, one fun topic.
Sure.
You're an author of 16 books. How does an Army veteran and a businessman and a someone who's served under President Trump, how do you author 16 books? Where do you find the time, and where do you get your inspiration from?
I'm typically not doing anything between midnight and 4 a.m. So, when I have to write 1,000 words a day. I had a command sergeant major once tell me when I was commanding in the 82nd Airborne, sir, if we're not falling ahead or getting ahead, we're falling behind. And that's absolutely true across life, not just in the writing world, but when you're writing and having published, Macmillan, St. Martin's Press is my publisher. They're one of the big 4 or 5 publishers out there. I do a book a year, and you have to write it in about 6 or 7 months. You turn it in, and then you go back and forth on edits with the editors, and then they put it into production, and it comes out, and then you go on book tour. So there are 3 distinct phases: the writing, the editing, and the marketing. It's a business, and it's one that I do 100% myself. I don't farm it out to any ghostwriter or any of that kind of thing. And I do have a writing coach who looks at every one of my novels, and she gives me feedback and all that, just like Tiger Woods has a swing coach.
Sure.
I'm not saying I'm the Tiger Woods of writing, but so for me, it's fun. It's a passion, and it also is very therapeutic. And I've been at a book conference all week in San Diego, and you get a lot of questions about, what axe are you grinding and all that. Like, I'm an entertainer. I write for entertainment. I'm not trying to prove a point. I'm not writing about my life. I'm just entertaining. And when you think about people have a limited budget, they're going to spend their $10 or $20 on entertainment. They have to choose between you and Tom Clancy and a million other authors, or am I going to go to this movie, Steven Spielberg movie? It's how people entertain themselves, by reading and getting lost in the world. So that's your competition. And I write from I use a screenplay writing format to outline my books. And I just want to write the most entertaining and enlightening. I guess in some cases I use a lot of historical examples, bring them in and create this, for my protagonist who's flawed, create a problem he has to solve, and have somebody, the antagonist, trying to stop him from solving the problem.
Fascinating. That's a whole nother podcast. Is it
All
based
right,
on your?
We'll do that one.
No, it is just fascinating, and you're fascinating, just so well-rounded. You just have your hand in so many different things. And again, having read one of your 16 books, it is very entertaining, and it's number 1 in a series. So I need to continue that series, and I certainly will.
I'll bring you Total Empire, which is number 2 in the series, next time we sit down.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Tony, thank you so much for taking the time out today to share your insights into just, veterans and transferring those skills into business ownership, or even working for a franchise. And we have so much to learn from you. So thank you for being here. And I look forward to our next discussion.
Likewise. And thank you for what you do here with this podcast, Stacie. Thank you.
My pleasure. All the best.
Likewise.
All right. For anybody that is interested in learning more about Homefront Brands or any other franchise opportunities that are available today, please feel free to reach out to me at Stacie@fusionfranchising.com. Thanks, and have a great day.